Fallen Angel and Ayato Kirishima X Reader Book 1 by this person. Please go follow them. I cannot read that. Anyways, without further ado, let's get into this. Chapter 1. The wind ripped around 10-year-old Ayato's hair as he walked down the street beside his sister Toko. He tightened his fist, his face twisted in a permanent scowl as he observed his surroundings. The whole place was infested with humans. He hated them with a burning passion that could rival the burning heat of 1,000 suns. He loathed them. They took away his father, they ripped away the one person he loved immensely, and they did it without even an ounce of remorse. So yes, he hated them, and living among them, walking beside them, disgusted him to an extent. He felt a hand curl around his tightened fist, his eyes widened as he looked up. His sister Toko smiled at him softly, her purple blue orbs reassuring. The smile that reminded him so much of his calm and loving father. He scuffed and ripped his hand away from hers, increasing his pace so that he was now walking ahead of her. Toko sighed sadly as she stared at the younger ghoul ahead of her. She could feel the anger and anguish rolling off him in tidal waves. She wanted so badly for him to be happy, to try to live as normal as possible, but that would never be possible because the older he got, the more his hunger consumed him. It wasn't the hunger for sweet human flesh. No, it was the utter and complete madness for revenge, and it was festering his soul. Toko could feel him slipping away day by day, hiding into his anger and pain and sorrow. Bit by bit he was slipping away from her grasp. There was no use saving someone who didn't want to be saved. Ayato didn't want to be saved. He was a blazing fire, and his hunger for revenge was his steady fuel. And there was nothing Toko could do to change that. As they turned down a dark alley, they heard a loud, shrill cry from the alley to the right. Ayato stopped walking immediately. Toko stopped by his side, the sweet smell of blood almost making her ravenous for human flesh. She bit her tongue and controlled her hunger. The way home was the alley to the left, so she went that way, ignoring the helpless cries from the other alley. She stopped walking when she realized that Ayato wasn't by her side. She glanced back positive and saw him staring into the dark alley where the cries were coming from. Ayato-kun? He walked into the alley without responding. Toko's eyes widened in panic as she quickly ran for him. Ayato-kun! She's gone and grabbing his arm. Stop, you might be walking into someone else's dinner. You know how territorial ghouls are. Ayato glanced back at her with a blank, daring look, his beautiful purple eyes replaced with the red eyes of a ravenous ghoul. She gasped as he ripped his arm from her grip and continued walking down. She called after him, yelling his name and scolding him, but he ignored her focus on the cry from what he assumed was a pathetic human girl. Toko stopped by her tracks when she saw what was going on in front of her. There were 3 ghouls. Each one had a human in their arms. The 2 other ones were devouring the flesh of a familiar-looking young couple, while the other was holding a little girl down and forcefully opening her eyes. She screamed and kicked, crying, as she was forced to watch the ghouls ferociously devouring her parents. Knowing she was next, Toko's eyes watered involuntarily. She knew them. That was Kimi and Dainji, and the little girl was their forever cheerful daughter, YN. Sensing an audience, the 3 ghouls drenched in blood turned to the 2 younger girls, eyes crazed and wide from all the human flesh and blood. One of them snarled, "Hey punks, get lost unless you want to be next." Ayato tilted his head to the side, looking at YN in confusion. He remembered seeing her almost every day of the week at Onteiku. She was always with her parents when they stopped by. She'd always smile and seem ridiculously pure and innocent. She would always ask her parents to buy her a chocolate chip cookie, and then on their way out she'd leave it on the table with a note on the napkin for Ayato. He was sure she was under the delusion that they were friends, even though countless times he'd swear at her or call her names. She'd still smile cheerfully at him and leave him a chocolate chip cookie every time she came over with her parents. She'd been doing that for 3 consecutive years. Regardless of how cold Ayato was towards her, he wasn't sure whether it was pathetic or admirable. He smiled, as annoying as it was. It always made Ayato feel better somehow, and now as she was crouched on the ground sobbing violently, her eye-colored eyes wide and filled with terror. He felt something snap in him. He was confused at the pang in his stomach. He realized that seeing her in this state made him feel anger and pain. The feeling was so raw and abnormal to him that it left him breathless. "Hey, punk," I said, "beat her or you'll be next," the same ghoul snarled, standing up and cocking his head to the side. His kagane was Baikaku, a type, and poised to strike like a venomous snake. "Don't talk to him like that," Toka snarled, her eyes already red and black. Ayato snapped out of his trance and flickered his gaze to the ghoul who yelled at him. "Making a girl watch while you eat her parents is low, but cannibalism? Tusk, that's a bit too much, don't you think?" He drawled in a slow, cold tone. Toka felt her skin crawl. The tone was so cold and monotonous that it made her freeze. It reminded her of how much her happy and carefree brother had changed. The three ghouls growled and released their kagane. Ayato jumped up swiftly into the night sky, his wing-shaped kagane crystallizing, and before they could even react, they were pierced by shards of crystallized kagane. They all collapsed in the pool of their own blood. He landed without a sound and stood up. He glanced at Wyan to see her curled in a ball with her eyes squeezed shut, walking slowly towards her. He stopped in front of her and knelt down. "Hey, annoying brat," he said, tilting his head to the side as he stared down at her. She wasn't sobbing anymore. She sniffled as she slowly opened her eyes, revealing her twinkling, eye-colored orbs glistening with tears. She looked at Ayato with wide eyes. Ayato's eyebrows pulled together in confusion. As he stared down at her, his kagane still exposed, and his eyes still ghoulish red. She wasn't looking at him with fear or anger or terror like what he thought. She was gazing at him with a look of astonishment and awe. He wasn't used to a human not looking at him without fear of what a monster he was. He wasn't used to anyone looking at him like this. It made his heart tug and thump in a way he wasn't used to. It mystified him. Then suddenly she flung herself onto him. Her small arms went around his neck, and her face nuzzled against his neck, and her small body pressed against his. His eyes widened and shook as she hugged him. He didn't know how to react, so he just sat there tensed and frozen in place. He didn't know why his heart was beating this fast, or why his mind was racing. She was a human, a pathetic human, just like the ones who killed his father and his mother. "Thank you," she whispered softly before slipping out of consciousness. Toka's cold eyes softened immensely as she watched Ayato pick Wyan up bridal style. He was staring down at her with a look Toka couldn't quite pick out, but one thing was for sure, this girl would change everything. Oh, that chapter's so sweet. I can't wait to read the rest of it. But, yeah.